I'm working on this drawing today. This was the one that got the most votes on the Patreon feed when I talked about what I was going to draw, and everybody wanted to see this one. The cool thing about this drawing is that I started it quite a while ago, and you know, if you set something that you're doing and you start working on it, and then you leave it, and then you come back to it, you will find that likely that you've improved since the last time that you've worked on it. That's what happens to me if it's been a while. And I see every time I leave and come back, then I'm like, oh wow, I wish I had done this or that. I'm way better now than I was then. So sometimes a piece of artwork can turn into a very long, drawn-out ordeal because you're constantly trying to better it as you go. This piece is sort of like that, but there's also something else that makes this one kind of interesting. It is not a very high-quality image. This image is pretty low quality, actually, and I wanted to see if I could do it anyway because I loved the drawing. The photo. So what I've done is I've got multiple of this is the actual, I don't know if you can see it. It's, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, but it's both of my two daughters with my husband when they were little, and now they're 16 and 17, so they've grown quite a bit. So what I've had to do is, because I'm using an iPad as a reference, it's a decent quality picture for online or for any kind of looking on your iPad or your phone. But when you go to print it, you really get some low, you'll see how the detail is not there. When I zoom in really a lot, you can really see the graininess of the image. So what I'm having to do is screenshot each piece in order to get it to scale. I screenshot just her and Tori, and then I'll screenshot Walt, and I'll screenshot Evie, and then I'll get it to scale. And then, granted, it's kind of blurry. The goal is, and which I'm going to be trying to teach, is how to take an image that's not that great and make it better in your drawing. So if you'll notice here in Tori's eyes, there was no light, no reflection of any light. Well, partly because of the way she was looking, but I also didn't have a great picture. So what I did is went into Photoshop for my reference and looked at where the light hit the other's eyes. And I thought, well, if she had any reflection or light hitting it, it would be kind of on this side of the eye. So I kind of left it there and made my own version of some light highlights in her eyes. That was the first thing that I did differently. What you're looking at is just the very first layers. So I'm very grainy, and I'll zoom in here in a minute when I start drawing. It's a little bit grainy because the first layers are just kind of laying down. The first layers of color are not smooth. I haven't built up. I'm just putting the color, blocking it in where I need it. And you'll be able to see that as I start to draw it, it'll get more and more sharp. So what's happening is this is blurry, and what I'm going to do is attempt to draw it more in contrast, like sharp. So we can do that because I'm using very sharp colored pencils. So having a very sharp colored pencil means that whenever I draw maybe right here an area that is blurry over here, if I can make that line a little less blurry by making it a straighter line or less blurry because I have sharp pencils. So more of a contrast between one color to the next, or more of a drastic change between one color to the next, rather than fading it all together and making it blurry. So you have a couple of options. You can draw, if hopefully you're following my line of thought here, you can draw it exactly as you see it, which would give us an overall kind of blurry look, which would be like blowing up this image, which is not the highest resolution. Or you can try to clean it up and make it sharper. So I want to clean it up and make it sharper, and that's what I'm attempting to do today. So I'm going to work a little bit on the second and third layers around her eye. This is going to take a long time to finish this drawing because I have 3 faces with multiple layers. They're all light skin. Light skin is one of the hardest colors of skin to draw. You can see that my husband has a little redder and darker tones in his face, so it'll be a little bit easier. And my youngest daughter had kind of a little tan on her face, so that part will be a little easier. But the very fair skin people always take longer to draw. So it is definitely not going to be a short project, and today's hour will just barely make a dent in it. I'll be drawing some of the layering just to show you how we can smooth it out, but I'm going to zoom in first. I wanted you to see how I have my reference laid out first, And then I'm going to zoom in. And you won't be looking at the reference quite as much. You'll mostly be looking at what I'm drawing. I'm going to try to stay in this area. Doubtful that I will get to the mouth. If I do, I'll zoom out so you can see it. Hopefully my head stays out of this. We were in such a rush to get this done that and set up that this is the fastest I've ever set up a live stream. Let's just put it that way. And then with technical difficulties on top of it, that was like making for interesting moment. So I'm going to start with light flesh just because it's been a while since I've worked on this piece and I want to just kind of start with the lightest color. I never jump into a drawing with a dark color. I want to kind of blend my way up. So you are probably seeing this drawing a little bit brighter than I want you to because I have a hot light on it. So it's a little bit more saturated than probably what you're seeing. Maybe or maybe not. I'm looking at the screen. It looks okay. But I've zoomed in quite a bit so you can really see what I'm actually doing. So I've got a really sharp light flesh pencil and I'm still got some little tiny holes in this little area where skin tone or paper is showing through. And my goal is to make this very smooth. And so my reference photo has this area that's pretty dark right here, but it also has more purple than light flesh. But I just want to kind of start building up some of that skin tone because we're still on the very first level. Now, those of you who are new to my Patreon or haven't watched me a lot, I want to emphasize every time that I draw that even though it looks like I'm going up and down strokes, I'm actually making tiny little ovals. It's just very tiny oval marks. It's hard for you to tell from looking straight down at my project, where you're not looking like my hand is, I don't know if that can really demonstrate, but I'm looking straight at it at an angle. My desk is at an angle, but you're looking, the camera is straight above it, looking down. So my proportions are a little bit different than what they are in real life, or at least it appear to be different to you than what they are in real life. But whenever I'm drawing like this, I'm actually making little ovals. I'm not making straight lines, even though it looks like I am. So I'm just going to kind of trying to work on the contrast and the value here and map in some of these little areas and make it darker. The skin tone was very, very grainy because I just put the first initial layers, and you'll get to see me put the initial layers right here, but I just want to kind of warm my pencil up, and I don't want to just jump into a drawing real fast with a dark color. So I'm kind of starting with this light color and just kind of gradually looking carefully at what my reference photo looks like, using kind of the side of the pencil, and I'm making a very light touch. I don't have to press hard at all, because after you've made the first and second layer, you end up kind of, it's easier to apply the color once you have something down. On a white piece of paper, it's harder to see it right at first, but I still usually start really light and then build it up as I go. So subsequent layers, the more layers they get, I can press a little harder if it's a final layer, but the more layers they get, the more easier it is to get the color to show up just by barely touching it. So I'm just kind of putting some more light flesh in here. There's this area right around her nose, right here, that has this blue shade. It's almost like a little sky blue shade and some like lavenderish purple. So I'm kind of, right now what I'm mostly staying in what I'm doing is making sure that I keep the value accurate. So if it's dark in my reference photo, I want it to be about the same dark level of darkness in the drawing. If it's a super light area, I want to leave it light. I'm not so much worried about the color right now. This color is going to be built up to have more like magenta, light magenta in it, but I'm not as worried about the color immediately. I'm worried mostly about the shapes and the value, because the shapes, meaning I see a dip here and I'm looking at the overall dark pattern. If you get to where you see, like now I'm coming back to this after a long period of not drawing on it, I already see that I need this light area right here. So I'm using a Tombow Mono Zero with a rectangle eraser tip, and I'm just kind of picking up a little area here that in my reference photo showed more light. And what I'm looking at, how I know that, is I'm looking at this shape here. It goes like this and has a darker here. And without seeing the reference photo, let me pull it over a little. You can see these shapes. So here you can see a light shape. It almost looks like a light bulb or something right here. And then you can see it dip in right here and go around. And so I'm looking at the shape of that value. So if you look closely, you can see this light value is all in here, and it actually goes like this. It looks like a cactus maybe. So think and see these, practice seeing everything that you see as shapes. Practice this. This is an entire shape. So everything that's the same tone and the same value, if you practice looking at it as a shape, don't think about this as a cheek or this is a dark spot under her cheek. Think of it as a shape. And if you can, even little kids can match shapes. So if you were to draw this shape, what would it be? Sometimes I associate it with what it looks like some kind of an animal. If you turn it sideways, this is like an armadillo's tail. That's hard to see there because I am zoomed in a little too close. But this is like an armadillo's back. And then this is the armadillo's belly, and this is the maybe an anteater's head or something, or an armadillo's head. So if you start seeing them in shapes, it'll make it easier when you go to draw on your piece to know that you have you've mimicked that shape. So when I get to that little armadillo shape right here, I'll be able to look at it carefully and say, did I match it? But I stay connected. So when I'm up here, I don't really want to jump down here and start making that shape. I want to stay connected to the eye that I already created. And I'm just going to continue to draw this. Here in the eye, I'm starting to see here that there's more of the light magenta, but that's okay. I'm still warming up with my light flesh. Light flesh is my base for almost every skin tone except for the very darkest people. They don't have a light flesh base because there's no need to. I can jump to a medium flesh because I know their skin tone is going to be much darker. So I'm already sharpening my pencil. And also, if you're new to following me on watching me draw, you'll see that I'm rotating my pencil between my thumb and fingers a lot. I'm just going to continue to rotate it like this because as I draw, obviously after I've drawn a little bit, then I rotate it because what happens, it starts losing its sharpness on that one side. And by flipping it, rolling it around in between my fingers, it's much easier to keep that sharp edge. So I'm just kind of gradually. Now to do this properly, it would take probably a couple hours to finish layering up all the skin around her face, her eye, just the skin around her eye. So I'm not going to continue and do the whole hour on this eye that I already started. I want to show you how I start skin and how I continue it on as I go. Now, sometimes you'll see me doing this brush stroke. I'm not doing circles all of a sudden because when I see something that's like a clear line, in the reference photo, it has like almost like a line there, and it's not colored in. So you'll see me do this stroke because this is the only way I'm going to make the line there is by darkening that area in the shape of a line. We don't draw lines on faces unless we see a line. Now her eyebrows, her eyelashes are really blurry in my reference photo, and that's okay. I can choose to sharpen them up or leave them blurry. We are trying to go for maximum sharpness because my picture is very blurry and I don't want it to be blurry like that. So I'm going to make them a little sharper than they look in the drawing. And that is definitely something that makes it a little different than most of my drawings because I always tell you, draw exactly what you see. And that's easy to do if you want the drawing to look exactly like you see it as the reference photo. But sometimes you want your reference photo is not good enough and somebody gives you like a not so great drawing. And I've for those of you who are sending me critiques or pieces that you've done and asking for critiques because you're one of my $20 patrons, you'll notice that one thing you'll notice about your own, but pretty much everyone is doing drawings of reference photos that are not high quality. They're pretty low quality. In fact, they're probably so low quality that I would turn them down as a commission because I want people to be happy with my work and I can only draw what I can see. Now, if somebody gave me this one, I would draw it if I was doing commissions. But as part of the reason I don't do commissions anymore is when I do my own drawings, I can pick and choose, and I can make sure that the reference photo is very, very good quality and my drawing is going to be really high quality, and that's what I want if I'm going to put my work out there in the world for people to see. I want it to be the best I can do, and in order to do my very best, I need to have a really good reference photo. So I encourage you, if you're taking commissions early on, I'm using the eraser because I got a little thick area there. I'm encouraging you, if you're taking commissions, especially when you're learning to draw, make sure you have a very high quality photo, and you do not have to accept a commission with a really low photo. If somebody is giving you a picture of somebody that was maybe deceased or some reason, maybe it's a really old photo and you're having issues with that, they need you to draw it and there's no way they can get another photo. Well, that makes sense. You know, you may agree to do that, but you just need to let people know you can only draw what you see. And so you're only going to be able to draw however good the photo is. You can enhance it on your own and do your best to enhance it and make it look better like I'm doing with this one, but that you should never let them think that you are going to be able to make something perfect when you can't even see it. So I'm pretty, I don't like doing that, and I'm seeing a lot of my students are actually drawing things that are like, why are you drawing this? There's no way I would draw it. So more power to you for trying. That's great. I think it's awesome that you're willing to try something like that, but don't be hard on yourself if your reference photo is really poor. You can only draw what you see in general, unless you're really good at making stuff up, but then you're probably not going to have it look just like the person. So up here, I can see that where my eye is right here, I go straight up, and then I see that the eyebrow has like a shaded purpley area all the way out to here. It's not light flesh, but I'm putting the light flesh down as the base. I'll go back over it with some more purple. So I'm just kind of mapping out those shapes that I see and trying to make sure that they match. She has hair coming down in her face. We'll do that last. But that's just showing you some of the layering that I'm doing. I always go from right to left, top to bottom, or bottom to top. Just this circular thing is always, for me, because I'm right-handed, it's always this way. So that way, whenever I'm done, all of my strokes are moving the same direction, and it looks really nice. When you come over at an angle and you see it, it looks really painted, like all the same direction. But if you start going a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit up and down, your pencil marks will show up, and they will look kind of crazy when you look at it from the side when the light hits it. Because especially if you're doing any burnishing, because what happens is as I build it up and I get harder, shinier layers, those will really show up on the side, and it will look kind of tacky if you are going all different directions. So if you're left-handed, I have a couple of, I'm blowing, by the way, instead of using my dusting brush. Use a dusting brush every now and then to get some of that pieces of the lead or whatever off of the paper. But I like to just kind of blow it off every now and then because it's easier. But, okay, so what was I saying? So, as you're drawing, I can't remember what I was telling you before. Okay, so I'll probably think of it or watch it back later and say, that's what I didn't finish that sentence, because that happens. One of the trickiest things is learning to draw and talk at the same time, or at least talk and have any meaning to what you're saying. That gets kind of difficult. So try to bear with me if I say words that aren't the right words. It's not because I don't know how to communicate. It's because drawing and speaking at the same time take a lot of effort. My drawing is always better when I'm not speaking to people. So a lot of times I'll do like tutorials, and then I'll do a couple of hours when you're not watching, so I can be completely in my element drawing. I'm using a little bit of cream now just because I see I want a little bit bright. Sometimes cream, this is called cream, it actually looks yellow. It's the Polychromos cream looks to me like a really lemon yellow. Sometimes adding just a touch of cream will actually just brighten an area. I'm so lightly touching, it's not really adding yellow to it, it's just kind of brightening up that area. What I'm seeing the most of that I'm missing is the magenta, the light magenta. And so I'm gonna put a tiny bit of light magenta in here. Now there's a clear hair that goes along her face right here that I want to include, but I don't want to do that till the end because they look so much better when you just kind of throw it in there on the top after you've done all the layering. So I know that it's there, and I'm just kind of going to map around it because I want some of that light magenta to show up on the left side of the hair. And maybe I'll pull this over so you can see. the hair I'm talking about. There is a hair right here, and it's an ever so lightly shadow of a hair, but those are really easy to include when you're done drawing the skin tones. So that's why I have not drawn it yet, and I'm going to do it towards the end. But up here at the top, there's a whole bunch more of this light magenta that's going to be incorporated. And so for this stage of the drawing, it is a lot of very light marks, layering, 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 layering. It, you know, even whenever people think it's done in an area, they'll see me go back many times to get that smooth quality. And like all in here, there's no, I don't have the light magenta. I will go in order of color, so from light to dark. I started with the light flesh because that's my base, sometimes cream and a little bit of ivory. And then I'll build up with the light magenta. And before I get to my darker parts of my shadow will have the violet. Sometimes I'll have purple violet, and I'll have caput mortem violet. I'll throw the caput mortem violet as a very last, like in these really dark areas. Caput mortem violet has a little bit more brown than I would like, and so usually it doesn't get used except for really dark areas or dark shadows, the top layer. But like all in here, there'll be some caput mortem violet I see, but it'll be super light. And then some purples with it as well. Now, the reference photo does not have these eyelashes really clear and visible. It's just like this blur of color. It doesn't have like a line where I could see it. Now, my choice is, and I may decide this towards the end, my choice is to draw it like I see it with this purpley color just kind of all real lightly pushed together. The magenta, that was violet I was using. This is a light magenta. Just kind of all just thrown in here. I could just continue to do this and not try to make it nice and clean lined for those eyelashes. Or at the very end, I may decide that I really need more of that definition of those eyelashes. And if I do, what I'll do is take probably the dark sepia and possibly some caput mortem violet, and I'll just kind of put a couple of little lashes, and I'll do the same thing down here. I'm not quite ready to detail them out, but you can kind of see just a couple of little strokes what happens, how you can just define an area very simply with just a caput mortem violet. There's definitely more of this magenta over here, and also some almost like a light blue color. Some of the shadows actually cast sort of blue. But right now I'm just going to kind of skip over this area and go down to the area where we talked about. I said I wanted to show you how I start the skin tone. So you can see just a little bit I did. It layered up a little bit and starting to get smoother. But right now it's still so, especially in this dark shadow area, it's very, very, very splotchy. And this is not how it's going to be when it's done. I'll use a combination of terracottas, caput mortem violet, a little bit of purple violet, or just purple, or just violet. There'll be a lot of different shades that go into making up this shadow over here. So sometimes it can be annoying to be looking at it unfinished. You just have to remember that you want to kind of build it up all together. And typically, yes, I stay in one little area. I don't even leave this area until it's 100% finished. But the reason you're seeing me have so much of the skin done before it's ready and not moved on is because this has been a demonstration piece multiple times. And so when I'm trying to demonstrate what I do, I have to kind of jump around and show you these different areas. But ideally for me and the way I work, and I realize not everybody works this way, and I honestly, it's a personal decision. However, I see the pros to being able to finish one little area completely before you move on to the next is that you don't miss anything. Sometimes when you're working and you're just working all over the place like this, I might move on and down here and finish all this and forget completely that I never finished this piece up here by the eye. You could scan it all over and find that, but sometimes you'll see that you messed up. You're like, oh, I forgot to go back and look there. So for me, the reason I stay, and like normally if this was my piece that was not being used as a demonstration, I would not leave this little section of the eye until it was 100% built up to the skin tone, color, shade, value, everything that I like. Now what happens is I move on and move on and move on. And then towards the end, once the hair gets put in, I might then see, even though I thought I was finished here, I might need to come back and finish more. That happens all the time. But generally speaking, when I'm drawing, I don't want to leave an area till I feel like it's pretty much done. So that means I would stay there. I would pull in some of the violet color to get this a little darker. I would add in these shadows. And I would start getting more, with accuracy, more of a layout of the eyebrow, because it's just the beginning stages of the eyebrow, just kind of very lightly sketched in there. But I would start putting all these purple colors, finishing it out. There's no way I would go, leave until I was done. But I'm going to force myself to show you how I start the skin tone. So we started the video, I started the live stream about 7:30, so I'm not going to stop at 8, even just because I was supposed to start at 7. That didn't happen. Hopefully this house selling process will be done soon. The last people stayed in our house 45 minutes. Hopefully that's a good sign, and they weren't just sitting around talking about another house they loved, because they had us kicked out of our house across the street, and I was unable to get over here to you guys and do my live stream. Okay, so I'm going to use just a teeny bit because this is kind of bugging me before I move on to the skin. This is sky blue. I'm going to put a little bit of sky blue right here because I saw it on the reference photo that there's some blue in here. There's also some white like on top of it. I might end up erasing it to get more white, but I'm just going to go right on top of white. That really is something that was kind of bugging me that's in the reference photo that I didn't have. Okay, so right now I'm going to move down to this area here on the nose, and I'm going to show you how I do new skin connected to old skin that I've been working on. Old skin, but previous skin that I've been working on. And I'm going to step ahead, and I'm going to start with the light flesh. I told you light flesh was the base. I'm sharpening it with an electric sharpener. I use an X-Acto School Pro, and if you're wondering what kind of sharpener I use, can't really pick it up. It's pretty big. And I'm going to go at an angle here, and I'm just going to very, very lightly touch, and I'm going to go just below, and then I'm going to bleed into over where I was at before. Super light, just very lightly touching, because I want to make this almost I want to make it invisible that I was adding on to something. And so I'm starting very light, just barely going over the last area that I touched. May need to rotate it and fill in little tiny holes or areas as I go, making sure all of that area is covered. And I'm just going to keep going. And so remember I talked about shapes. I see a clear shape right here. It's almost like a little bell shape. And so I'm going with a light flesh. Now all of her skin is going to have a light flesh base. Even the really lightest areas won't be white. They look white, but they're not. They're going to be light flesh. And in order to make them look as light as they're supposed to, I'll darken all the other color around it. So where I'm just continuing in these little round or oval strokes from the bottom left to the top right, very slowly overlapping each one as I go. It's like I usually talk about this as a continuous loop. I never lift my pencil or have to stop. I will lift it to turn it, but I don't have to stop drawing my circles because they're all going to overlap each other very carefully and make one continuous connected loop that you don't really see the beginning or the end. That's the most important part. You don't see the beginning or the end. So now that I'm getting over here with this light flesh, as you're drawing, you should start, it's very natural to start realizing that you're using light flesh as a base, and it's very natural to say, but I don't see light flesh in her skin. I'm seeing now, because I've got this color on the paper, I'm starting to see that light magenta pop a lot. And that's okay because light magenta will go on as a second coat in areas that I see it. So what I'm doing now is kind of just putting that base on. Now when I see something's a definite darker area, for instance right here, I know it's about this far down from the line, about right there, there is a dark area. I'm going to use that stroke I talked about, the line stroke, and I'm not doing the circles anymore. I'm just kind of building up this area here because I know this is that part of that armadillo head shape that I mapped out in earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and darken that because I know the value is going to be dark there. Even if this color is not perfect, I know that it's going to be at least that dark. So I can press a little harder and do like a stroke here. And then we can get the color right after. I'm mapping out the value and the shape of the shadows on her face. Comes around here. Now, the reason I'm doing a stroke like this instead of just coloring is just that, to kind of map that area out. It almost has a line around it. We'll fade it into the rest of the skin and you won't notice it, but I want to get this clear little shape here. Okay, and now to fade it into the others, we'll just kind of real lightly go over. This is an extremely light touch. I grip my pencil really tight. So often it looks like I'm pressing hard, and my table is not, used to be up against the wall and now it's not. So sometimes it shakes. So it looks like I'm pressing really hard to make the table shake and everything, but that is not the case. It's not shaking at all. So I'm continuing with this area here. And I'm just really lightly going. Now you can see anytime I start and stop, it's easy enough to come back over here and start going back into it. Just very lightly go over the area you were last and come into the new area. So this is just the first layer of skin. There'll be a lot of other colors built up on top of it to get that. Now I want to come over here. I'm going to jump over here and show you how to get the shape of this nose. The line drawing is almost absent in this piece. There's hardly any line drawing at all. So I'm kind of going to be sketching it as I go. And I know the shape of this shadow is important. And I know about where it goes here in relation to the eye. So I'm up here looking at this eye. And I can go straight down. I know it's about right there. So I'm really just gauging based on what I see in the reference photo and how long the line should be for her nose, the shape of her nose. And I have somewhat of a line drawing telling me where the top of her mouth is right here. So I know I'm safe in the right area at least. Now I just need to kind of match it. I'm just sketching it out with light flesh because light flesh is the base skin tone, and I can color over all this area. But I'm just going to kind of try to sketch out her nose. She has sort of a little round button nose. She's got her daddy's nose for sure. We call it the Windrich nose. It's rounder. I have a pretty boring, straight, plain nose, and hers is pretty round. So I'm just kind of trying to just get the shape of it. Those will be darker shadows because my skin is all this color, her skin. So if I continue to do that and don't build it up with more color on top, it will just disappear whenever I go put all this light flesh in here. But I'm going to continue to darken it as I darken the skin around. So there is some real purpley color in here, and since I know it's going to be there and I want you to be able to see the difference, I'm going to start with the next shade up. So when I'm looking on the purple areas, it's always going to go in this order. Sometimes, so this is light flesh, light magenta, and then this is violet. Sometimes you're going to see me use some terracotta, some caput mortem violet, or even some purple violet in between these, and maybe some medium flesh. But those are my standard kind of go-to colors. So this area here goes this side. Let's see, let's get the magenta, and I just want to make sure and get that kind of mapped out. Okay, so I'm just kind of doing that sketch stroke, and I want it to match my reference photo shape of the nose. And you can kind of define it a little better as you go. You'll start to see, oh, maybe there should be a little bigger point or less of a point or whatever. But you may have to manipulate it as you go along if you don't think it looks like it. So I'm going back in here with this light flesh. Now, this shadow is going to get significantly darker, but I know all around it is really light flesh. Need a sharper pencil? One thing I'm always telling people in my classes is sharper pencils. Everybody thinks they have a sharp pencil, like when it comes out of the box, they're like, oh, they're already sharpened. That's not sharp. A sharp pencil has to be very, very, very sharp. If you choose not to use an electric sharpener, that's fine, but you'll need to use your manual sharpener to get it to a very sharp point. That very sharp point is going to make a big difference. And when you're putting it down on your paper, it's really even too hard to explain. Just get your paper out with a really sharp pencil and see the difference in the way it feels and applies versus using a dull pencil. It's a big, big difference. Okay, so I'm going to use a little bit of the light magenta here just to, this area will just continue to be built up, and it's going to look kind of awkward when it's like so light. It'll be adding some purple, some kind of dark gray. Sometimes I'll use gray on the face. Usually to get that gray, I'll be using purple and could put more than violet. Different colors together. It's like when I tell people don't use browns on a face. Always avoid brown on a face. But interestingly, the purple and the terracotta almost make a brown. But it's so much cleaner and fresher and more realistic than taking a brown pencil and sticking it to a face. Just doesn't ever look good. So I always avoid browns on the face. And you can see that sometimes I get carried away. I'm supposed to be working on the nose, and you'll start working in one area and you'll be like, oh, it's darker here, it's darker here, and you'll just keep moving, and pretty soon you're on a completely different side of the face. That's okay. Wherever your pencil kind of guides you and takes you is where you should be working. As long as it's connected. I don't recommend jumping away from this part and starting to come over here randomly, because you could have your shadow off. It's going to help you being relative to where everything else is when you're drawing. It's going to be helpful to stay where you're at. So if I'm here, I can always gauge how big this shape of light on her cheek is, how far away it is from this side of her nose to the outside of her face. There's already some area in here that I'm going to change up a little bit, but it needs to be all relative to whatever other line on her face is. So I can clearly measure the distance between here and here if I get stuck or feel like, you feel like you don't have the right shape, you'll be able to do that. But if you just start randomly drawing down here, you could have her lip in the wrong spot. So you want to stay connected to something that you can easily see that it's relative to another shape or relative to another line where it goes. So I'm just kind of using this light flush to fill this in. There's very much some light magenta right here in her nose area, but I'm just laying a base of the light flush. And I can clearly, I almost never use the light magenta straight on the white paper. It's going to have light flesh under it because there's a basis for it. I mean, all of her skin is light flesh. It just has different colored shadows all over it. So if you think of it that way, light flesh is the whole base of her face. Now, a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just make all of her face light flesh and then go back over it? And like I said, I like staying in one little area and finishing it and staying connected. Another thing is I don't like putting my hand on an area that's already done a lot. So if I can work on an area and finish it and not have to go over it a lot with a piece of glassine paper like this sitting on top of it. I always have glassine paper under my hand. But if I did all of her face first, I would have to be sitting here and moving it all over her face, smearing the pencil possibly. So there's a lot of reasons, but for me, it just always works out better to do it a little tiny bit of a section at a time, not finish, the whole light flesh and then go back with other colors. I like to focus on where I'm at that moment. Like this area is very, very light, so I'm making it a very, very light application of the light flesh. And then there's areas that are really a lot darker, so I'll just kind of move into it. Okay, so I'm going to use a little bit of the light magenta, go right over this area because I know it's there. See it? And these proportions are the most important. If you don't have a great line drawing and you're not that great at, you're not that great at copying exactly what you see in distances, by all means measure this part of her nose. Measure all around it and ask yourself, how how big is this section of her nose? How far is it, the tip of her nose, from the corner of this eye? Take some measurements on your reference photo. How far from here to there? What angle? Whatever you can if you don't have a line drawing. Because if you get this shape all wrong, that's a big deal. Because you'll change the shape of somebody's nose makes who they are. And where all these shadows hit makes who they are. So it's real important to get these proportions right. I'm looking at shapes. So as long as I get, and I have it to scale, and the shapes that I draw here, like this is a darker shape. The value is of the contrast between light and dark. I know it's significantly darker right here. And so I'm going to make sure and put it on there dark with that light flesh. Same here. I'm going to use the line sketch drawing like this, straight. Just kind of sketching it on as a line because I see it that way. It's not a straight line. I'm not drawing it. If I draw it, I'll have a clear line, looks like just pencil drawing. It'll start to look cartoon. So I'm sort of sketching very light, and it's a thick sketched line. It's not thin. That straight line drawing edges would definitely make it look like a cartoon super fast. And I want to get, I'm shooting for photorealism. I'm not shooting for the cartoon look. You may be looking for a cartoon look, and if you want to, that's how you do it. So I'm going to take the light magenta, and I'm going to fill in this area here. And I'm starting to see more of matching now. It feels like it's matching my reference photo now because that little purpley area here is almost the right color. And one thing to keep in mind, I've talked about this before, and I used to teach a lot with the Derwent Chinese White, and I realized it was really hard for people to follow my lead by using that because it was too hard for me to explain how much pressure to use. And when you're putting wax on top of oil pencils, it can be a real disaster if you don't do it just right. So I learned that teaching with Polychromos alone was a lot better than teaching with wax. So what I do now is I will switch between a darker and a lighter color, always Polychromos, because I know they're going to work that way. So sometimes you'll see me switch between light flesh and the light magenta. They're a little bit different tone and value, but when I go on top of the magenta with the light flesh, darkens it up, but it also smooths it out a little more. I'm not pressing any harder. I'm still making this really light pressing, but because it's going on top of two layers, it's really picking up my color well. And I'm going to make sure I get that whole shape of the nose side there. This side up here has to be really light up here. And this is just the first 1 and 2, maybe 3 layers of the nose. It's going to take a lot of layering, color to, and contrast and stuff, getting it all on here to really make this skin tone finished. Skin tones are one of the most difficult, it seems to me, for people to learn. It was easy for me, and I love drawing skin tones, but I see people struggle all the time trying to get it. Usually, when I see their pieces and they think, okay, well, how does it look? Did I do it right? Usually what I see is that they're not finished. They think they're finished and they're not. They might call this done. Okay, well, her nose is done. But it's clearly not. I have a lot of shading. I have a lot of blending. I will make this look like skin before it's all done. It won't look grainy. Right now you can still see a lot of my pencils marks. Like I'm going to use some of my violet now, and I'm going to come up in here and just kind of lay this shadow in. And I'm a combination of my little oval strokes and my brush stroke. And at the same time, using the sharp tip, because as you start to build up the colors and values in the shadows, you're really going to start to see it look harder to fill in. Like you're going to have to fill in with these tiny little dots will show up in the skin tone, and you'll use the really sharp tip of the pencil. Sometimes you'll see me doing this just to fill in a tiny divot. But as it gets more and more layers, light layers, I'm building up very light touch layers. But as you build up those layers, it'll get easier and easier to fill in those little divots and start to make it look solid and not grainy. So this is pretty purple. The reference photo starting to look blue to me now. What will happen is as you apply color, it might look good at first because it's better than that light magenta, but then all of a sudden you'll start seeing other color tones. You should start seeing other color tones pop out at you. Sometimes people will ask me, how did you know to just use blue or whatever? Well, take your blue, if you're not sure, take your blue pencils and like hold it on your reference photo and like ask yourself, like right now I'm using the sky blue, and ask yourself, does that match? If it doesn't start popping out at you naturally, get a scratch piece of paper and just start kind of adding different colors together to try to mix and blend and get the right color tones. It is definitely a skill to learn how to get these color tones right. I'm using the light magenta over this little area here because it's starting to look kind of peachy, kind of orange. And that's another thing too. You will find that sometimes you will jump around, like I jump around over here. The reason why is because it's not going to look accurate here until it looks accurate here. So if I just got this shadow all up as dark as I needed it, and then this was not, it kind of gets distracting. So I'll start working a little bit on both shadows to build them up together. Also, I want to make sure I remember exactly which colors that I used for that shadow. So I'll just kind of, by now I have that down to kind of a science. I can always tell if I need to add terracotta or add purple or add magenta or light flesh again. So that's kind of like, here, I'm using the light flesh over this magenta up here because I want to blend it in a little bit better. Remember, if you use a little bit lighter tone, like one tone lighter, one scale down on the color value system, you will help blend it in. It kind of works as a little bit of a blending pencil. I don't use blending pencils at all because I think they just mess up your paper and move the color around. If I'm going to put a pencil on paper, it's going to be adding value to my paper. It's going to be adding color, literally adding value. So I won't use a blending pencil, and I don't recommend them at all. They really just tear up your paper and they're useless. She has like a little mole, and in my reference photo it's about right here. You can see it's about right here, and that one looks like I started drawing it maybe at one time, but it was in the wrong place. So I don't know if I've just improved on my ability to draw what I see since I started this a while ago, or if that was just an accident that's not even trying to be a mole. So I'm going to get rid of that original mole, fill this area in a little bit. And to get a mole on there, I'm going to use a cinnamon pencil. And it's not really the right color of the mole, but it's a good start. I'm just going to put it about right there where I see it. It's kind of a dark area. And I'll go back over it with probably a little bit of purple. I'll use violet right now. I could use a little bit of nougat or terracotta to make that show up. That's probably the only exception to any brown tones on the face, is I'll use nougat sometimes, which is kind of a grayish brown. And that will really help a lot if you use that color in some molds. But for the most part, I'm not using them. Now you'll see me use gray around the eye sometimes. Like this is a cold gray 5, and I'm just going to kind of touch it up in here because it's kind of grayish area there of her eyebrow or eyelash. Just a little bit, and I'll freshen that up on top of that with Caput Mortem Violet. Oh, let me grab my Caput Mortem Violet. Caput Mortem Violet. And sometimes it'll be darker, like right now this is her eyebrow or eye line here is darker than my reference photo. And so I'm going to want, and part of that is because I haven't darkened up the skin on this side, but also part of that is because I told you this reference photo is just so poor quality. So I'll end up going back in on top of this and brightening, darkening this all up, adding some magenta, light magenta, and that will make the rest of it seem not so dark. Yeah, I'm jumping around a little bit all over the place. I'm just trying to show you how the process of building up the skin. So now I'm not going to use the cinnamon. Be careful not to use the cinnamon like in areas like this. I've had people do it before, and sometimes I will, but I don't want you to if you're new at drawing skin tones, because the cinnamon has a little bit of brown in it, and it can really start making it look ugly there. So if you feel like you need to make that cinnamon color, the best way to make the cinnamon color is to use like a medium flush in terracotta. It'll be easier for you, I think, to mix the terracotta. Here's the terracotta, and here's the medium flush. I think the medium flush and the terracotta will make the cinnamon easier for you. Using the cinnamon has a little bit too much brown. So right here, I'm going to just kind of very lightly put some of the medium flush just to increase the value. I want it a little darker. The contrast needs to be a little darker there. And so I'm just kind of going over that area. And then the terracotta, and as I'm putting this on, I'm seeing that's a little bit too pink. I'm going to have to put some more purples in there. Now I'm going on top of it. When you use the terracotta on top, very, very light touch. A little bit goes a long ways. And the terracotta will brighten up an area super fast. So if you're like ever working on cheeks and you're putting some pinks and you're feeling like, oh, that's just not bright enough, a tiny little pop of terracotta will really go a long ways in brightening it up, really making it look fresh. So like over here on this pink cheek, if I just add a little tiny bit of terracotta up to the edge of it, I'm really going to start seeing something more glowing and bright. Okay, but very, very, very light. A little bit will show up a lot. And then I'm going to put some of the terracotta into the shadow because we're still working on building up this shadow. And this is where I was talking about sometimes purple and this terracotta almost makes a brownish tone. What I'm doing is in the center, I'm pressing a little bit harder, and as I get closer to the edge of the shadow, I'm lifting it very, very, very light touch because I want this not to look like a line was drawn or like an area of a cavity. I want it to fade very, very gradually from the dark center to the light edges where it goes into the skin. And the reason I want that fade is because I want this to look as though, just like it does in the photo, it's a shadow cast. It's not a dip or a hole. I see some artwork where people will try to do a contrast, even some very good artists. You'll see some of the areas of faces where they draw, and if you look closely and you think about it too long, you'll start to realize that it looks like they made a hole in the face instead of a faded area, instead of a nice graduated like gradient from one of the colors to another. They'll make it like really black right here. And all that does is the darker an area is on the shadow, the more it looks like a hole in the face. And you don't want a hole in the face. So just take a look around at some other artists' work and make sure you'll see the ones that are realistic and feel real almost have like a glow on those shadows. It's definitely not a drastic change. It's very, very gradual. And it's almost like you can still see the skin under there, but it's a darker color on top of the skin because the light's not hitting it. So the terracotta helped a little bit, but it's not dark enough. So I'm going to use the violet. And a lot of times I'll use the purple violet because purple violet, if you look at this purple violet, hopefully you can see in the light versus the violet, it's just a little darker. So it really depends on how dark I need that shadow. So right now I'm just using the violet. I'm going to sharpen it really well. I'm just going to go right in here. If you guys have any questions while you're watching me draw, you can put your question in the place that you see on the screen where it says ask a question. I'm not sure what it says. I think it says ask a question. And Walt is here with me, and he will cue me, and I can answer that question while I'm drawing. Part of the purpose of the live stream is to make it where you guys can interact with me. This live stream is being recorded, so I absolutely will be putting it out there for you to watch later and just slow it down. That's fine. But it's always helpful if I know you have questions while I'm drawing, I can answer them and maybe even do some special demonstration just for you. So you might want to take advantage of the fact that you have these live streams, a lot of people are just using it like an extra video because maybe you don't have time to jump in every time I do a live stream, and that's fine too. But it's a good way to actually jump on and ask questions that you need something specific. And that way you can kind of cater my instructions to what your needs are. If I don't know what you need, if you are stuck with a shadow or you're stuck with a certain color or you're having problems with one little area, I can't help you unless I know about that. So I'm building up this with the violet and just continuing to add it till I get the contrast or the shade that I see in the reference photo. You should be able to really be able to tell by now how much darker that shadow is getting. That purple is really a perfect color for the face. I'm not done Caput Mortem Violet, if you notice. I only use Caput Mortem Violet in the absolute darkest areas of the face. And I'm not going to use it until I know I need it to be that dark. There's this little hook in her nose, and I want to make sure and get that little hook on the edge of the nose there. Those little tiny, all the little shapes that you see need to be accurate proportionately. And you may see me using an eraser and kind of carving it just perfectly. I'll be moving it around a lot. Now, it looks kind of dark there because I don't have the light flesh on there yet. Once the light flesh goes on, it won't be so dark. It looks dark now, but once you start putting this light flesh on the edge, is what I'm talking about. Why you want to sometimes do the outside edges of an area first. Just like her hair. Once I finish her hair, all of her face may seem to be needing to get darker or lighter or whatever. It won't usually need to get lighter. Usually what happens is when it's up against the stark white paper, usually your colors look very vibrant and rich. And then you go and you put in the hair, which is in her case is a really dark brown. She has almost like a blackish brown hair. And if I go and draw that in, the hair right now, her face suddenly becomes less vibrant. And so that's typically what will happen. At least you won't need to erase it. You'll usually just need to go back over the whole face and maybe add a little bit more saturation once you get the color in. But I'm going ahead and doing this little cheek area because it is very, very, very hard to get the shadow right without at least having the base of the skin done right here. So I'm going to putting in the base here. Sorry about my dogs back in the background. I think they are feeding time, and my teenagers are feeding them. So there's some barking from my littlest chihuahua. Okay, so I'm going to use a little bit of a violet. And I'm just going to kind of putting that in the way I see it. Definitely needs a lot of buildup. Okay, I'm going to use light magenta. This pencil I use a lot of lately. I'm noticing that I'm just really going through this light magenta pencil, probably because I'm drawing a lot of fair-skinned people, and you'll see a lot of this color in fair skin, especially depending on like if they're outside or a lot of bright lights hitting their faces. You'll see a lot. And when you're using it, sometimes you'll feel like, whoa, I'm just adding too much purple. There's no way her face is this purple. But stay true to what you're seeing. I mean, if it's matching the color that you're seeing, I'm jumping back and forth between the light flush and the magenta. But if it matches that color that you're seeing in your reference photo, then believe it. I mean, just keep doing it the way you see it, and don't worry about what your brain tries to tell you that this is too purple or too pink or no way this color would be in someone's face, because the point is it takes a lot of colors to make the right color. I'm getting really close to about an hour drawing, but I'm going to do a few minutes more here and just kind of work on the shape of the nose. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of the light magenta just to kind of get this section of the nose. But you can see how slow drawing goes, and this is just the first coat. I'm only doing the first coat because I want you guys to get more of an area that I've covered. If I try to finish just one little area, I could stay a whole hour on just this little section of her eye, and I don't want to do that. So I am kind of just trying to stay in one area. Now it still looks pretty purpley right now. That will change a lot when I start getting the different layers. If it starts to look too purple, add terracotta. If it starts to look too orange, add purple. That's just kind of the basic thing to remember, that you can tone one color down with another. If it all starts to look kind of sketchy, use your light flush to kind of blend it all together. Don't press too hard too soon. That's another really important tip. For your final layers, if you feel like you need to kind of burnish it or press a little harder, you can. Just don't do that too early on. A lot of times people feel like, oh, I can't add more color because I pressed too hard too soon. That's also a misconception. You can. Most times people tell me, oh, I can't add more color. I already added too much and now it won't work. That's not true. I've showed them so many times. I've sat down at people's drawings when they said, I can't add anymore because it won't stick. This is sky blue. And I sit down and I show them exactly how. And the way I do it is I use a very, very sharp pencil and make a very light touch in very small areas, just like I'm doing right now. It takes a teeny bit of mark on a paper to show up. You can see I'm not pressing hard. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not pressing hard on this area here on the eye. But if you need to scroll back and watch the recorded video, scroll back, scroll forward, speed it up, you'll see how much difference each little layer of pencil makes and how much smoother it gets as it goes. It's clearly still grainy in a lot of areas, and that will gradually go away as I continue to build up layers of the right color. And each layer is very light. My only time when you'll see me press really hard is if I'm on a top layer and I really need to smooth and blend it out. I might use the light flush as a final layer and just kind of press it down. I'm not going to do any of those final layers until I'm done with all the hair though. All the hair and pretty much the whole face, everything else will be done before I go back over and press hard. Whoops, I just threw my pencil. I did throw my pencil. Okay, well thankfully it's not Prismacolor, so it doesn't break when it hits the floor as easy. So I'm going to sharpen my pencil. And I'm going to go right back over this. I'm going to move get a little bit of a shadow there. I'm going to go back over a little bit of this skin here real quick and just kind of show you how it starts to blend and look soft. You should be able to see it starting to blend in and less pencil marks showing up as I move with more layers of pencil. It'll get cleaner, and in the beginning stages of every drawing, they look a little cartoony. That's just part of the nature of drawing them. There's so many times where I'm like, I'm going to use a light magenta now, where I'm like, this is just not looking, this looks like a cartoon. I don't like this drawing at all. And I'll just keep going and keep going and keep going. I have to remind myself that it takes time to build up the right shades and amount of layers to blend and smooth. Okay, so some of this looks like there's brown in here. Her eyebrow is brown, but it comes down into this area which was done with the purple violet, and it's a little too dark, so we'll blend that all down. Add a little bit more of the purple color. See, as I add it, I can easily add it darker. Keep adding. And if it starts to look too purple, the trick was terracotta. So I'll probably do that here. You can even use a little medium flush. Stay away from the cinnamon. If you're new to drawing, I'm not even going to do it because I don't want you to see that happen. I'm going to use the medium flush. Sometimes when people see me use cinnamon, they go, oh, that's just like a perfect color. I love it. They try it and it doesn't work. That's why a lot of you who have followed me for a long time may have heard me say, oh, cinnamon's a perfect color for this or that. If I'm no longer telling you that, it's not because it's not a perfect color. It's because a lot of people I'm seeing having problems with understanding how to use it. And so I'm a little bit more careful at what I tell. I found an alternative. Basically, as I learn from people who are learning from me, I start understanding that some certain colors or certain techniques are a little bit more advanced, and I'd like to see people start with something that they can actually accomplish and feel accomplished with. And so I've stopped teaching certain things like the Derwent Chinese White. It's not that it's not a great method, it's just that it's too easy to mess up. So you're going to see me change a lot of that. And it's not like, oh, she's teaching a different way now and because her other way didn't work. It's just her other way might have been too hard for the person who's just beginning. Now, I am not doing my left to right here. You notice that? Because this area above the skin, I'm going the way the skin grows, kind of like this. It's like if you're putting on makeup, you wipe it that way, you follow the skin. Sometimes you'll see in skin that I have to kind of follow the skin. I'm not going to, and I'm not going to just start always do this if the skin tone goes that way, or if there's like a wrinkle or something that's especially going a certain direction. Okay, so back with the terracotta, I told you I was going to use a little bit of terracotta in this area here. Now I'm going to do that. Super light, because you don't need to go dark with the terracotta. And you can use some of the medium flesh in the nose area to make this less purple. So that's basically what's going to happen is you're getting, you're wanting it to get darker, but you're not wanting it to look too pink, too purple, or too orange. So the combination of all three till it starts to match the reference photo is the trick. And it will take more than what we have time for in this 1 hour live stream to really build this skin tone up right on her nose. But like I said, if you take and go on the live stream, watch the recorded version, drag it backwards, drag it forward, you should be able to see a big improvement. Okay, somebody set a timer. I guess that's my timer to be cut off. He says no, it's just a coincidence, but it does happen to be 8:30, so I'm getting pretty close here. And I apologize once again for the delay, the technical delay.
I'm getting pretty close here.
That's Siri deciding to butt into my conversation. That happens too. Oh, wow. Tonight has been really interesting. So I apologize for the delay. That's been kind of a crazy day. I hope somebody comes back and places an offer on our house because they kicked us out for 45 minutes. So they must have really liked what they saw. We assumed they did. They were a family with 4 kids. And so we're hoping that this house was perfect for them. So I can move to Austin and set up a full-time art studio. I want a really large building that you guys can come to my workshops, and it'll be always set up, and it'll be much easier for me to schedule workshops because it'll be my spot, and I'll always know that I have time or room or a place. I don't have to try to secure a building. So that's going to be a really great move. And in the short term, you guys, I am leaving in less than 70 hours or so to go to Italy. So we'll be gone for 16 days. I'll be taking a ton of pictures. And yes, for those of you who are wondering, I am uploading the car picture after this live stream so that you guys can practice doing the drawing of the car with me when I do start it. I'm not starting that car, the red old car. Not starting it right now because I've got so many pieces of art that I'm working on, and I'm only going to be doing those new compositions and then holding them in folders until I finish one piece, and then I'll pull one out of those folders. But you guys can start now if you want on that car that I'm going to give you a reference photo of. I'm going to take some pictures in Italy for you guys to also use for my Patreon workshops. I'll be taking some for my own personal work and some that I can share and teach with. So stay tuned for some really cool pictures. I should be taking at least 10 to 12,000, maybe more, now that we have 2 cameras, and I'm actually an artist this time. When I went to Europe last time, I did not take very many pictures. I took 12,000 pictures, but I didn't take any for drawing. So imagine, now that I'm going over there with an eye for art, thinking about all the things I want to draw, it's going to be a lot of pictures. So I will share plenty of them with you guys. Thank you so much for being followers on my Patreon. Ask questions on the live stream. Ask questions of me in person if you need to. It'll be a little hectic for the next 16 days, 17 days, because I will be traveling. I will be following my Patreon messages. I will be following my art page. So I will be able to answer you if you have any questions or problems with any of this that I taught, or and I'm going to be getting you your 1 hour video of drawing in color pencils for July. I'll be getting it out soon. I probably won't be giving away the pencils until about the 17th of July, just because it's easier to do when I'm home. So anyway, there's a lot happening. So watch for some of the July videos coming out. They'll come out even though I'll be in Italy. I'll go ahead and release them because I'm going to create them before we leave on Friday. If all goes well and we don't get kicked out of our house for 45 minutes again for a showing. And as you can see, I've continued to draw while I was talking. So it's starting to get built up and look more and more realistic. And as I continue to add layers, it will look more and more like her. So thanks for watching, you guys. And if you have any questions, go ahead and still upload them onto the YouTube channel whenever I put this out there. I'll answer your questions there or in my Patreon, wherever you need. If you want to do it privately, you're welcome to message me as well. Thanks for watching.